Rocky Horror Minute is rated R. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is also rated R. We're going to spend this time discussing the movie in gory detail, and along the road we will talk about some adult content and use some of our favorite swear words.
We have blueberry, raspberry, ginseng, sleepy time, green tea with lemon and honey, liver disaster,
Consider yourselves warned.
Welcome to Rocky Horror Minute, the podcast where we discuss the Rocky Horror Picture Show in excruciating detail 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Leandra.
And we have a real treat for you today. It's minute 61.
Yay!
Leandra, I completely forgot. What happens in minute 61?
Oh, you forgot? I forgot too.
Oh no.
Well, it's a good thing that I have notes. It is a very dialogue-heavy minute. When we last left our intrepid heroes, Brad, Frank, and Riff were huddled in front of the transducer board looking at a screen showing Dr. Scott investigating on the lawn. Brad answered the question, "You know this this person," with "I." And in this minute, he continues with, "Most certainly do. He happens to be an old friend of mine." Frank says, "I see. So this wasn't simply a chance meeting. You came here with a purpose." And he nudges Brad aggressively with the end of his whip. Brad, confused, responds, "I told you my car broke down. I was telling the truth." Frank, becoming increasingly upset and paranoid, says, "I know what you told me, Brad, but this Dr. Everett Scott," and at the mention of Scott's name, Frank pushes Brad again with the whip. "His name is not unknown to me." Brad continues to be confused and says he was a science teacher at Denton High School. Frank, dropping a bombshell, continues, "And now he works for your government, doesn't he, Brad?" To which Brad responds with an almost silent, "What?" At this, Frank is enraged and continues his poking at Brad while saying he's attached to the Bureau of Investigation of that which you call UFO. Isn't that right, Brad? Brad, who has fallen down at this point, exclaims he might be. Frank threatens to hit Brad with his whip and says, "Nyah," but menacingly. I'm not sure if I conveyed that well.
Yeah, I'm quaking in my boots over here.
Yeah. But Brad, now terrified because of the nyah, not necessarily because of the whip, says, "I don't know." And Riff cuts the tension to remind us that this exact same Dr. Scott the lovers are fighting about is still there. He says, "The intruder is entering the building, Master." Frank responds, "He'll probably be in the Zen room." And we now see Dr. Scott in the flesh, somehow in the middle of an extremely filled room, investigating a marijuana cigarette. To which he says, "Ah." We pivot back to the lab, where we see Frank walk back to the transducer board and ask, "Shall we inquire of him in person?" And that's where the minute ends.
Such a minute for dialogue.
Yeah, I think this might be my favorite minute.
Really?
Yeah, I'd say that it's definitely the best acting of the entire movie. Like, the line delivery is super tight, the face acting is delicious. You see a lot of the manic energy that Tim Curry brought to Clue in this exchange, and the melodramatic stuff that Brad brings to the table, I think, just brings it over the top.
I would agree. I mean, the acting is superb in this minute, and I've already spoken about how I really think this scene develops Frank's character. This is the first time we've seen him get... Well, I guess we saw him fly into a rage and kill Eddie, but we're seeing, like, how much a little thing can set him off, and we're seeing him become truly paranoid for no reason. He's a really interesting, complex character, and of course, Barry's acting is just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. I really like that Frankenfurter has gone from, "I'm upset about you losing my literal boy toy," to, "I'm furious that this man that I just had sex with possibly was playing me." And it was literally in one sentence.
Yeah, he's really having his lemonade moment here. Before we go too far, I want to mention something that I should have mentioned last minute.
Oh?
Yeah, which is just that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Riff's Earthling line is our first hint in the movie of the alien thing.
I mean,
Besides them being generally weird. But
would you say that the incest is not a clue? Because Patricia Quinn seems to think that that would be a clue.
no, unfortunately the incest is very real on Earth. So I think, I mean, of course, we later learn that Sweet Transvestite's lyrics are declaring that he's an alien, but I think it's safe to say that no reasonable person without that knowledge that's given at the end of the movie would have taken it to mean that.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say maybe is when is during Hot Patootie when he says cosmic light came into my life, that kind of stuff. That's clearly referencing the alien thing, but it's so oblique. I don't think that on a first viewing people would necessarily pick up on it.
Yeah, and I don't even think I necessarily, now mind you, I've said many, many times that I don't necessarily remember the first time I watched the film, but I don't know at what point I started clocking that it's at this point that they're saying that they're aliens.
Yeah, I mean it was when I was reviewing my notes for these minutes that I was like, "Oh, this is our first moment. This is when it's declared," because for so long just I've been watching this movie with the full knowledge that they're aliens and not thinking about when that actually gets revealed. So,
Even us, the voices behind Rocky Horror Minute, are discovering new things about this minute.
it's so true.
So, I have a question for you. You've listened to the commentary a lot.
I have.
I know that it's not the director's commentary, but I was wondering, did they ask at all, or I guess, did they speak at all to why the director's note for Brad is to reveal his right pec during
No,
this?
they
Because
did not.
I mean, it's very clear that right about at investigation of that which you call UFO, both Frank and Brad seem to be attempting to release just that one peck from the robe. Like, there's a concerted effort. It's like, okay, we were told that there needs to be exactly one nipple on screen right now, and if we mess it up, that we're going to have to do the take again.
Yeah, the answer is no, but they did spend this entire scene, Richard O'Brien and Patricia Quinn just spent talking about their impressions of Barry, what he's like as an actor, what he's like as a person, as a friend. Like, that is this entire commentary. They're just talking about Barry and their personal feelings on Barry and their first impressions of him. It's a really great clip. I was actually, not to pull back the curtain too much, but I'll tease that I was saving that clip for our Once in a While episode.
Aww.
But yeah, I really loved everything they had to say about Barry, and they didn't mention the nipple specifically, but I've always thought it was a fun detail. When I play Frank, I always hope that my Brad trusts me to help reveal it at the right moment because I've been, I worked on the timing to get it down. Sometimes they're a little premature, which is totally in character for Brad, but
It's a normal thing to happen to lots of people with penises.
but right. I think that is very clearly deliberate, so I agree it's interesting.
My next thought about this is it takes a long time for someone to go from the grounds to fully inside of a room, let alone this specific grounds to this specific room. And I'm imagining that Riff Raff was watching all of this happen on the monitor while Brad and Frank were having their fight and trying to decide, like, at what point it was important that he interject what was happening. And when it became abundantly clear that Scott's intrusion was more important than the lover's spat, he just had to jump in. I
Yeah.
I
Well,
think of it from Riff's point of view and just laugh.
yeah, and we do get another like sneaky little smirk from Riff after he says that. I was wondering about this did not seem like a particularly handicap accessible castle. And on top of that, like, I mean, I guess the door's just unlocked and he just came on and he appears to have let himself in and just started investigating, which is an interesting tactic. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
My my thought is that maybe this is a room that opens up to like the garden or a patio, and he was able to wheel in, and that door was left open because that was how the dogs were released. Something like that.
Okay. That's a very good idea. But why? He came here to find Eddie, we know. His strategy seems to have been like just entering the castle and I don't know, I guess hoping that nobody saw him or pulled him to them with a magnet or anything like that. But he's not being
Well, he
sneaky.
brought the binoculars.
I know.
Yeah, thankfully the didn't go into the castle wearing the camo makeup and go full on like Apocalypse Now. That would be very awkward for the rest of this movie.
Agreed.
Which makes me wonder, did he expect to bump into somebody?
Yeah, I don't know. The whole Scott thing is interesting and I can't wait to discuss this in great length. We'll probably go over some of Scott's history and motivations when we get into dinner scene, but very interesting character.
I think that a lot of people forget just how cool Dr. Scott's character is. Yes, he's a plot device, but he's a much better plot device than you would think if you just kind of give it a second thought.
That's true. I like Dr. Scott. I've always, not only do I think he's an interesting character and an important plot device, but I think he's very fun. I love how goofy Jonathan Adams is with this role. Even though I've always been of the belief that they should have kept the double casting, I have no complaints about how Jonathan Adams played the character.
I used to play Dr. Scott a lot when I first joined a Rocky cast. It was one of the few roles that I could play because I was 17, and I loved playing Dr. Scott. I had all of the lines down. I had just all of the fun stuff that he does in dinner scene, and it's just when I see another Dr. Scott really have a lot of fun with it, that's when I know that they're going to do good stuff in the future.
Absolutely. Who do you think was smoking?
If I had to guess, I would say Columbia because Magenta has been busy cooking and Riff has been dealing with Brad and Frank and is not helping Magenta with cooking. And I don't know that Columbia's had much else to be doing right now.
That is fair. Something else that makes more sense when you know that the two characters were once one. Columbia's just been fucking around, I guess, but
Me.
I know. Well, especially with the weed. I think not necessarily right now, but I think Columbia and Magenta smoke together a lot. I think that's like
I think
one
you're
of their
projecting.
main. Perhaps. But what I feel certain about, like I also think Frank joins them sometimes, but what I feel certain about is that Riff does not partake.
Really?
Yeah, I think he is completely a downer in that way. He's like that one. Did you ever have like a weird hanger-on in like your high school friend group who like just was kind of there and was like a strange, socially awkward person who was kind of like uptight about everything and was always kind of being a wet blanket, but you guys were like nice to him, but you were like, okay, fine, we'll just smoke over here then. And Riff would be the one who was being like, my asthma, yeah, I can tell you smoked 3 hours ago, get away from me.
Oh my god, I even remember the name of that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, their name was Leandra.
Yeah, that's not the kind of person I'm talking about. Did you ever have a guy hanging around who had kind of like school shooter vibes?
Yes. I grew out of that, okay?
Oh my god. It's funny because it's true.
No. No.
Oh, listeners. You're witnessing the evolution of Leandra. But yeah, so anyway, that's what I feel. I have a hard time imagining Riff smoking or being fun in any way. So,
I can see that. I think that he could even go in the other direction and be very straight edge and obnoxious about it.
yeah, like I feel like he would like tattle to Frank or something and Frank would be like, "I know, I'm the one who bought the weed or whatever."
Or Frank would go, "Oh no, they're smoking weed. What room so I can avoid that room?"
Oh, actually, you know what? I also feel that Frank is the one who rolls. I don't think Columbia can roll. I think that's obvious. And
Yeah.
I think Magenta is too lazy. I think it was Frank who rolled that joint.
Oh, you know it would be really fucked up
What?
if Riff has to roll.
Oh, man.
He's just like, I don't want to. But he's really irritated when Frank does it because it's just like super sloppy and it falls apart. And he's just like, fine, I'll do it. But don't smoke it around me, okay?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good thought.
So those were all of the things that I wanted to bring up. Did you have anything else before we dig into the jacket?
Well, I did want to highlight, as you already did, I wanted to highlight Frank's "nyeh" moment because it's one of my favorite little Frank isms, and it's kind of funny because he is very clearly in that moment not going to or trying to hit Brad. It's very clearly like an empty threat in that second. Like the way he moves his body is not getting ready to whip somebody, basically.
And yet, Brad still flinches. What a
Well,
fucking
yeah.
nerd.
Well, I mean, my mom threatened to spank me as a child far, far more than she actually spanked me. And she did spank me, and she knows that's wrong now. We all know it's wrong now. She didn't know at the time it was a different time. No hate to my mom. Also, she never, like, hit us hard enough for it to hurt, really. It was just kind of like, meh. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. But yeah, exactly. But what she would do all the time is, like, raise her hand in warning, and that's kind of what it felt like to me.
Yeah. I can say that the kind of warning of a smack is sometimes scarier than the smack itself.
100%. Especially if you have a mom who really does not desire to do you any physical harm and is only even going through the motions of spanking because that's how she was raised, basically. Anyway, that it was all I had about non-jacket topics.
All right, let's jump on into the jacket. What are we going over today?
Today we're going over the left, like, side and sleeve of the jacket. So, like, the front left pins and then the left sleeve.
Beautiful.
Yes.
This has your favorite stuff in it.
It does. It has actually a few of my favorites, and my absolute favorite pin is the first one I put down to talk about. It is a pin it's a blue pin with some gold angelfish on it, and the text says Butlins, Clacton, 1967. And that is, if you're like me and you're like, what is a Clacton or a Butlin?
I think we all know, but just
yeah.
for the people who don't,
Yeah,
maybe explain.
Butlins Clacton was a holiday camp, so as far, basically like a recreational area you could go that was located in Clacton-on-Sea in England, so that's why it was called Clacton. It's kind of strange. It's like if I called it like Kelly's Annapolis, but that's what they did.
Is this like going up to the Catskills or something?
It's kind of like that, except it's a coastal thing. So, there's activity. It's like if you go to like a lake and there's like fishing and water skiing and stuff like that to do.
Ah, gotcha. So
Yeah.
this is a souvenir from a trip that Frank took?
I guess so. As we go through these pins, I think we will find a lot of evidence for my theory that Sue Blaine was going through shops and buying anything she thought was aesthetic or cool and putting them on the jacket, and that this was not some actual criminal biker's jacket. So, yeah. The Butlin's Clacton opened in 1938, closed in 1983. There's a few circular pins that have like a C and then a Z inside of it. That is the logo for a company that many people call CZ. It's Cheska. Then I apologize in advance. This is a Czech name. It's a Czech company. I think Cheska Zbrojovka. I'm sorry. We're going to call it CZ. There's several of these on the jacket. It's a Czech company that makes motorcycles. It's been around since 1919. By the way, Leandra, what year do you think the motorcycle was invented? Because this research has taught me that it was a lot earlier than I thought.
To answer that, I guess that I would have to know when the bicycle was invented. And I would assume that just as soon as they figured out how to motorize that, we had motorcycles. So I know that
Weren't
the,
bicycles like invented by Leonardo da Vinci?
yeah.
Okay.
So
So motorcycles are not quite that old, I will say.
I'd say that it's probably early Victorian though, because you still need to have industrialization in order to have at least a mass marketed something with an engine. I would assume.
Yeah, I guess maybe my problem was that I did not know how old engines were, or at least like small enough engines to be on a bike. If you had asked me, I also would have said that motorcycles came after cars, just
Oh,
because, well, to me it seems like it would be harder to make a small like motorcycle that was street worthy. Anyway, you're actually a little early. It was 1885. So,
oh. I
yeah.
guess that makes sense though. Like, yeah, because you'd also need to have a good amount of like road that people could drive on
Yeah.
because we're probably not talking about like motorized dirt bikes. Nobody's going
No.
off-road with these.
No, yeah. The early motorcycles look like wooden death traps. So,
I love it.
yeah. So anyway, that is something to keep in mind because as we go through here, we're going to see a lot of motorcycle clubs and companies that have been around for a really, really fucking long time.
We should make our own, Kelly. Let's
Aww.
make a let's make a motorcycle gang. Sorry,
Okay.
a motorcycle club. We shouldn't
Yeah.
make a gang.
No,
Not
we
again.
shouldn't. No. I mean, we could get in touch with the Dykes on Bikes.
Oh yeah, they're filling up our inbox.
I wish. Any lesbians with motorcycles, please send pictures to rockyhorrorminute@gmail.com.
Yes, that would be ideal actually. And
Yeah.
remember, it is always the season of giving if what you're giving is pictures of lesbians on motorcycles.
Yes. So speaking of lesbians on motorcycles, Frank, we have we have a couple of pins that just say England, and I don't, as far as I have been able to determine, these are just like England pins. And they have a Tudor rose or the red rose of Lancaster on them. So that's just kind of kind of a symbol of that area of England, of Lancashire, but I don't think it was like a reference to the War of the Roses or anything like that, or the Tudor situation or the House of Lancaster. I think it is just a symbol of England and of that part of England. There are several rectangular red pins with a Swedish flag on them, and the name, again, I apologize, Husqvarna, I think, motorcycles.
Husqvarna?
Well, that is the American pronunciation for sure. And yeah, it is a Swedish origin Austrian company that makes motorcycles of all types.
And farm equipment, as far as I know.
Perhaps. I only have the motorcycles written down: motocross, enduro, supermoto, and street motorcycles. Oh. But a lot of these companies do also produce farm equipment, so that's very believable to me. They began as a subsidiary of the Husqvarna armament firm, so perhaps. But yes, they began producing motorcycles in 1903, so another well-established brand. And then another motorcycle brand, this is probably my favorite of the motorcycle manufacturer pins. It, I assume, is supposed to be some part of a motorcycle. I apologize, I don't know enough to know what it is, but the Scott logo features the name Scott, and it's over the background of, like, it looks almost like a crescent moon, except it's more round and it's upturned in like a horseshoe shape. Anyway, if anyone knows what part of the motorcycle or what the hell that is, let me know. But that is the Scott Motorcycle Company logo. That is an English motorcycle manufacturer from West Yorkshire, and it was founded in 1908. And those are no longer produced. Scott motorcycles were ended in 1978. Next, we have a really interesting Concorde jet pin.
Ah, yes. The Concorde jet motorcycle.
I know. This was such an interesting specimen to me, because, so for those of you who do not know, the Concorde jet was a very, very famous airliner. It was supersonic. It could go insanely fast, like way faster than any commercial airliner on the market today. Its first flight was in 1969. It hit the market in 1976, which means that this pin must predate it actually being something that people could fly on. But it continued until October 2003. It was obviously very expensive to fly on this, like crazy expensive, because it could fly over the Atlantic Ocean, I think, in like 2 hours or something like that. It was something crazy. I know about it because I was once engaged to a huge plane nerd, and he never shut up about it. It was a really big deal. It was considered like a rich privilege. So maybe that's why it was included. It was kind of like, it was seen as a very bougie thing to be able to fly on the Concorde. And it was also kind of a sign of national pride for England. It was a really big deal. It was jointly developed by France and England. But it was a huge achievement. And so therefore it was a really important thing to British culture at the time. However, I also think it's very possible that Sue Blaine saw this in a shop and thought it looked cool. Because it's a beautiful pin. It's got the jet, and in the background it's got like a whole landscape, like clouds and sky and grass. So it's pretty, it's eye-catching. Maybe that's why it was chosen, or maybe it was to show like Frank has expensive tastes, or he's already got some other like England pride pins, so who knows? What do you think, Leandra?
I don't know, but does he have any other sorts of pride memorabilia on the side? Anything like that?
He's got the England pins with the Tudor rose.
Anything else? Any flags that would be embarrassing?
Oh, On the sleeve, yeah, we'll get to that. Yes, we will get to the elephant in the room, which is the Nazi insignia on his left sleeve.
So maybe he just has
I
pride for a
was
lot of things.
I was so confused. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss with that. I structured this tour so that we could have a Nazi discussion at the end. Really quickly, I'll go through the remaining ones, at least that I'm able to see. Some of them are really difficult for me to make out. But there's a few Norton pins, red and black. That's just the Norton Motorcycle Company. That is another English company. It was established in 1898, so that's an old one. Java is another Czech company. I don't know if it's significant that so many of these are Eastern European or Czech, but that's a motorcycle and moped manufacturer from Prague and founded in 1929. So, there is a pin that shows a yellow background and the silhouette of a motorcyclist, and it says Olympia 1971 BMF. I had to do a lot of digging to find out what this was referring to, but I think I found it. There was a group called the British Motorcyclist Federation, which used to exist, and they went by BMF, and they held an international bike show every year. It began in the 60s. 1960 actually is when it was founded, and its whole thing was promoting like responsible motorcycling and a more positive image of bikers, which I think is significant, again, to show that I don't believe all of these patches and pins were collected by the same person, because as we go through this, you'll see, well, I mean, they were collected by the same person. I don't think there was a biker choosing these items to represent himself and knowing what they meant, because we have everything from these kind of like wholesome motorcycle clubs who are like, not all motorcyclists are bad, and we've got Hell's Angels and Nazis and the Concorde jet. Like, I think it's very incongruous. It's hard for me to imagine what type of person would have collected those for his own jacket. But anyway, so that, I believe, was the International Bike Show hosted by BMF in 1971. And there's actually another BMF pin on this side that I don't know what event this is referring to. It's not the international show. It says 1968 Rally for Stanford Hall. I attempted to find out what that is. Could not, but it's the same silhouette biker logo, and it is BMF. So there you go, British Motorcyclist Federation. Several badges that show Triumph, which is the logo for another British motorcycle company. That one is from Coventry and was founded in 1885, so right at the beginning of motorcycle production. And yeah, you'll see a few, there's a couple that have like a checked flag in the background. There's different colored ones, but they're all kind of the same shape, and they say Triumph. Now, here's a couple that I have not been able to locate the origin of. There's a circular, well, there are two that both appear to be based on the shape of a wheel. One is like a circle, and it's like a wheel with a blue background. In the center, it says 1971, and on the outside rim, it says the Outdoor Holiday Show Colex. Colex. Don't know what that is. I've tried very, very hard. Please let me know if you do know what show this is referring to. I couldn't find any evidence of it. It may be lost to time. And then there's a similarly shaped one that says 6'5 Rock and Roll Club Special. Was not able to locate any information about this club, but surely these are, I'm sure, just motorcycle shows and clubs. It doesn't help that things like Rock and Roll Club are not very Googleable, as you might imagine, but there you go.
Nice.
Yeah. So next up, there is one that I really, really like. It is a big baby with a diaper on, and he's holding up a 1-ton weight, and it's labeled "Ton Up Kid." And that is actually a really interesting piece of history. I don't know if this is referring to any particular group or club, but I think it may just be referring to a general phrase. There were members of the like biker or rocker subculture. They were sometimes referred to as ton up boys, or less frequently ton up kids. And the reason for that turn of phrase is that doing a ton is English slang for driving at a speed of 100 miles per hour or 160 kilometers per hour. So yeah, basically bikers were known as ton up boys or ton up kids. It was sort of it was just a term for what we would call a biker or a greaser or a rocker. Also sometimes known as leather boys, which I think Frank would also not mind being referred to as a leather boy.
Yeah.
But I even found a song from 1973, so do that as you will, that is called "Ton Up Kids" by Dave and Ansel Collins. Now that song surprised me because it is a reggae song.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you won't be doing a cover of it.
I won't. I also won't be doing a cover of it because it sucks, in my opinion.
That has not stopped us in the past.
That is true. That is true. But I did not enjoy Dave and Ansel Collins' Ton Up Kids, but it was an interesting piece of music history and seems to be tied in. I was very shocked. I didn't think that reggae culture would have intersected with this biker culture at the time, but shows what I know. Anyone who knows anything about that, please. There is a pin that shows like the classic skull and crossbones and is labeled the Jolly Rogers. Clearly a motorcycle gang or club. I cannot find any information on them unless they are the club that was based in Seattle, actually still exists. It's a very old club. It seems unlikely to me, maybe because it is Seattle. But, on the other hand, it has existed for a long time, since the 50s, so the timing would make sense. I was not able to find... I have seen many images of their logo, which is nothing like this, so I've not been able to find any evidence that they ever used this type of emblem. So, and also, like, Jolly Rogers is not, like, a particularly difficult name to come up with, I feel. So I think it's quite possible that there was a completely unrelated group called the Jolly Rogers in England. But who knows? It could be the Seattle Club. It's not like there are no American clubs or groups on this list. So that was my thoughts, unless... Do you know anything about the Jolly Rogers, Leandra?
No, just a lot of really bad pirate jokes.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a racing motorcycle, red, with like a mint green background. There's no text on this one except there's a 7 on the motorcycle. Replicas are usually sold as Racer 7. And I genuinely don't have any further information about it because I couldn't find anything because there's no text. If this is a symbol for something and anybody knows about it, I'd be very, very intrigued to hear about it. Next, we have a really important one, the Hells Angels. There's also a Hells Angels patch that we're going to get to at some point. But Hells Angels, as I'm sure you all know, really, really important international motorcycle gang, has been around since 1948, was founded in California. This is not, and I I do not want to be beefing with the Hells Angels, so I'm going to be speaking about general public image. I happen to know that there are groups of Hells Angels who are like really good people who do great things. But the general public perception is that it is a white supremacist, dangerous group. And that is by no means, like, it is like such a huge group. It's not a monolith, but that is the general. If you ask people about Hells Angels, if you talk about public perception, there are some chapters that do not let you in if you're not white. So there's that. But yeah, that's you see it often paired with Nazi insignias and stuff like that. So that is very possibly chosen for a reason, but I don't really know.
I guess that's possible. I mean, we've already kind of alluded to the fact that there's other stuff on this jacket that might indicate that that's the direction that it's going. Maybe.
Right. But there's also stuff that's completely incongruous with it, but I do not think it could be possible that the Nazi patch was not. If this jacket was made for Frank, I do not think it could be possible that the Nazi patch was not chosen deliberately to make some sort of a statement. It is simply too recognizable and too significant. It's not like anybody would be going through a shop and be like, oh, what I mean, yeah, it's a Nazi thing, but it has a cool eagle on it. I'll just throw this on there for the aesthetic. Like, Hell's Angels maybe, but Nazis certainly not. So, but I think it's possible that Hell's Angels were also chosen for that reputation. Once again, if you are affiliated with the Hell's Angels, I have no problem with them as an organization, and please don't try to find me.
Or you could just let us know how you're feeling about how we're representing you via a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And
the Hells Angels writing like an all caps furious Apple Podcast review with 5 stars. But yeah, I mean, genuinely, actually, if anybody listening is knowledgeable about biker culture, especially of this era, I want to talk to you. I'm obsessed with this jacket, and I lack the context that I need to fully understand a lot of it. So genuinely, if you're a biker, hit me up, but also don't hurt me. Next.
Not literally hit.
Yeah, exactly. Not with your bike. There is a Boy Scouts badge, though, with a fleur-de-lis. And this, in my opinion, is one of the greatest points of evidence that this was not a biker's jacket.
No, I think that this was a thrift store jacket.
Yeah, I think that Sue Blaine bought this jacket and bought patches and pins, as I've been saying, and I think the Boy Scout badge is pretty much like indisputable evidence of that. I really struggle to imagine the biker who was like, I've got my Nazi pride here, I've got the Hells Angels represented, I've got other motorcycle gangs that are usually not friends with the Hells Angels represented, and, of course, gotta rep the Boy Scouts.
I mean, is that not the first gang that any of these people might have been in?
Maybe so.
You always remember your first.
So true. Yeah, and I don't really want to explore the possible reasons for choosing Boy Scouts, but I do think it's kind of potentially just a cute joke. And then there's a yellow rectangular pin that says, it has an M with wings. That is a motorcycle company called Matchless. Matchless was a motorcycle production company, one of the oldest in Britain. It began in 1899 and it continued producing them until 1966. very, very well known for winning races. They won the first single cylinder race. They're all kinds of famous motorcycle wins were matchless motorcycles. So they continued to have a following for quite a while after 1966, which is probably why almost 10 years later this still showed up on this jacket. A lot of people would put matchless motors into other bikes, like kind of what we talked about before with Franken bikes. So kind of an interesting thing. Like I said, they were very popular for a while. People made a lot of effort to keep being able to find spare parts and things like that. All right, and then we've got Fulham Anglers Club with a fish on it, goldfish. Could not find anything about this club, but based on the name, I'm assuming it was a fishing club. Fulham is an area of London that's right on the River Thames, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't even the first of the fish-related emblems, so I
It
can only
isn't.
assume that Frank enjoys fly fishing.
Yeah, exactly. And here, so the fishing again, making a very interesting view of this biker, but the next one we have is a Jaguar pin, which Jaguar, I'm sure many of you know, luxury vehicle brand, still beloved, was established in 1935 in Coventry, so it's another English company. They have never made motorcycles, so
Yeah, that was what I was about to ask. Like,
no, never. Well, actually, that's not true. They make some now, but they're not like real motorcycles. They're like, they'll roll out like a showroom like electric bike, like something like that. But you can't just go buy a motorcycle from them. They don't do that. So, what that means is that this doesn't make a lot of sense. Typically, the kind of person who is this into bikes and building his own bike, I mean, it's hard to imagine that Frank also has like a Jaguar in the garage that he's like waxing on his off days.
no, he has Riff to do that.
Well, that's true, yeah. And then Riff can wax his dome. There's like a herald type little banner that says the Vincent. That is Vincent Motorcycles, British motorcycle manufacturer from 1928 to 1955. So this is another one that had a huge following that was kept alive for, in this case, like 20 years, as you can see, and longer. People, there were whole communities dedicated to finding spares and things like that from Vincent bikes, so you could keep them running.
The major Vincent motorcycle that people had was called the Black Shadow,
Oh
and it
yeah,
was like a really cool, badass looking motorcycle.
yeah, yeah, much beloved. I think it's interesting how some of these manufacturers had such dedicated followings for decades after they were closed. And then we have the 59 Club. There's a patch that we're going to talk about in a moment too. The pin that we see here is like an octagon almost, and it's yellow, has the 59 in the middle, and it says Motorcycle Shows 1971. So this must have been a show that the 59 Club was putting on. This is a British motorcycle club. It was notable for being related to like British motorcycling subculture, the ton-up kids that we were talking about before. But it's actually a very wholesome organization. It was founded like basically as a church youth group, and then when they started doing motorcycle stuff, even to this day, like they're like heavily involved with the church. They just recently had like a blessing of bikes at Westminster Abbey. So
That's wholesome.
it is, yeah. So it's interesting, but it had a different connotation at the time. It was seen as something to do with like ne'er-do-wells who were into bikes. So, with that, I will go into the patches, unless you had any other notes on the pins, Leandra.
No, I do love all of these, though. I think that they all look kind of aesthetically pleasing together, even without knowing the backstory. Particularly this side of them looks really good.
Oh, 100%. Do you have a favorite?
Um, I'm trying to think. I like the fleur de lis.
The Boy Scouts pin?
Yeah, I think that it's cute.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, then let's go down. There's only 6 patches on the sleeve, so this will not take as long as the pins did. The top, there is Royal Enfield that's shaped like a wheel, and it has a red and gold logo in the middle that says Royal Enfield. That is an Indian motorcycle manufacturer. By the way, for this section, I'm going to be quoting heavily from Brandon Sutrina in the little feature he did on Columbia's Closet. I know we referenced him last episode, but shout out. This is great information for me. So there's a 59 Club patch. It is like old and fade. So it's not like pristine white like it would normally be. Ruth of Ruth's Anal Retentive Rocky Horror references this and mentions that she thinks it's just dirty and grayed with age, which I would agree with. The black looks a little faded too. So yeah, there's 2 59 Club patches. One of them is on the left sleeve. And next we have, so this says TRI and then capital BSA. And that is because it's a custom build motorcycle you could get that was a combination of Triumph and BSA. So it's a gorgeous patch though, blue and gold. The gold is metallic. Similarly, we've got Triton, which is another wheel-shaped logo, but it has metallic gold on it as well. It's very beautiful. Triton was the name of custom-built Norton motorcycles with Triumph engines, according to Brandon Sutrina. So, again, this is something that we keep going back to, but it was a really big thing to put different manufacturers' engines into other frames and do these custom builds to the point that they had names and logos and patches just for these hybrids. So I think that's really interesting. After that, Honda motorcycles, black patch with like a gold wing. It says HM and then under it, Honda in red. Honda, of course, still produces automobiles and motorcycles. Very, very large international brand. Brandon says it is often believed that this patch has metallic thread on the left of the wing and that there is no gold around the HM, but that is not true. Finally, there is a Nazi eagle holding the swastika, the classic Nazi emblem. A lot of people think it's silver. According to Brandon, it is gold. And with that, we must discuss why Sue Blaine has chosen to make Frank a Nazi.
Yeah, I spent so much time trying to go, no, she didn't do this. It wasn't intentional with the lab coat with the triangle. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the lab coat was an intentional Nazi thing.
No, she has said it wasn't, this is crazy to me because she has said not only that it was not an intentional like Nazi thing,
but she was mortified that people thought it was.
Yes. Yeah, and yet here we go. And what else is interesting, I guess, maybe what she was upset with, of course, the pink triangle was not a Nazi emblem. It was a way that they, like, marked gay people for slaughter. So maybe she thought that, that was unsavory.
But even with that, we already determined that the red triangle had nothing to do with that at all. It had to do with the fact that it was It was a medical
Yeah,
thing
no.
that was on the lab coat already.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it's strange that she would be so upset that people would think that that was intended to be a Nazi reference, but then have a Nazi reference elsewhere in the film. But I'm just saying maybe specifically she had an issue with the idea of like marking Frank in the way that gay Holocaust victims were marked, which I could see that how that would
Oh,
be
I
different to
understand.
her
Yeah.
than using the emblem, especially if she apparently wanted to portray Frank as a villain through showing the Nazi emblem. Again, I can't wait till we get to Scott and discuss how strange all of that is.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I honestly, the only thing I can think is that not a ton of thought was put into it besides like, oh, well, like Frank's a bad guy. Let's put a Nazi patch on there.
I want to say, and I'm not 100% sure where I read this, so do not take this as gospel, that for the first little bit of rehearsals for the Rocky Horror Show, Tim Curry practiced a couple of different accents, one of which was German.
I have heard that as well.
So maybe it's kind of a nod to that. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that they talk about that in the commentary as well, and about how he eventually landed on this really kind of strange, but very fun accent that he did for Frankenfurter. But yeah, it is simply just unfortunate. I will say, to his credit, in his notes on Columbia's Closet, Brandon did be sure to add P.S. Fuck Nazis. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's our stance too.
Yes, to be
Just
clear,
yeah.
I while I will not beef with the Hells Angels, I'll gladly beef with Nazis. They're usually easily punched piss boys
Punchable
anyway.
easily.
Yeah, cry if they get a milkshake to the face, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's we don't need to dwell on the point, to be honest. I think it was kind of a thoughtless move by because we're in agreement that this jacket was assembled for Frank, correct?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And assembled for aesthetics.
Yes, yes, that's what I mean. Like Sue Blaine went to a thrift store and just bought a whole bunch of different patches and pins to cover it with. And she did a fabulous job generally. But that, yeah, so I think it was probably just a thoughtless move. Unfortunate. While I do desperately wish to own a screen accurate Frank jacket at some point, like collect all the replicas and things, I do not obviously want to include that. That's one place where I do not mind not being screen accurate. I'll have to think of something fun to use in its place, but
It's just a pen of Marge Crumpin.
that is deeply aligned with my political beliefs. But that is all I had on the left side of the jacket. Did you have anything?
I do not. So I think we're on to callbacks.
Oh my god, I forgot about callbacks. But yes, we are. And there's some fun ones.
Yeah, do you want me to start and you can sprinkle in ones that you remember?
Sure, yeah, why not? I've
Yeah.
talked plenty. Go
Yeah,
for it.
give your mouth a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, she's got a long night ahead of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Brad says he happens to be an old friend of mine, you can say we fucked in college. When Frank says chance meeting, you can go, no, it was community chest. Kind of related to
That's a good
Monopoly.
one.
It's fun.
Yeah.
You came here with a porpoise. You can say on a porpoise. And
Eh,
the response to that is, of course.
no, it was a sperm whale we filled up on the way.
Yeah. And when Brad says, my car broke down, I was telling the truth. You can say the car got a flat or something like that.
Yeah, like, no, you were lying. You got a flat
Yeah.
tire. Yeah.
Or you can say assholes don't lie, they just give you a lot of shit.
Yeah.
When Brad says he might be, I don't know, you can start that line with, is Ralph gay? He might be. Are you? I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorites in the entire movie, and it's very difficult to time, and when you say it, nobody likes it except you. But
I think it's great. I feel
I
very
love
smug
it.
when I get it.
Yeah, me too.
So, next up, when Riff Raff says the intruder's entering the building, you can say, and the building likes it, or and the building doesn't like it. Well, the building should lube up and chill out, or the booby, or the building should take some poppers, I guess. Something like that. And
And you can do that. But
yes,
my favorite response to that is actually just to say, when he says the intruder is entering the building, as intruders usually do.
that one is good.
Yeah. It's kind of all they do. So,
There is this nice little pregnant pause. I'm sorry, pregante pause
yes, thank you.
in the middle of he'll probably be in the Zen room. And during that pause, you can say, where do you keep your Zen? Or where do you keep your Shankar music? Or where's the weed? Something like that. I like where do you keep your Ravi Shankar music,
Yeah.
but that's just for the two of us, apparently.
Yeah, I don't think a lot. That's only for people who are, old hats enough to know that that's the origin of the sitar music, but it's very good.
And a follow up to where do you keep your Zen? In the Zen room. You can say, Zen go and get some.
Yeah.
I do like that. And those are all the ones that I had. Did I miss any?
There are two major ones that. Well, did you actually maybe just one? Did you talk about chanting for man titty or male nipple?
I did not.
Yeah, so that's a really big one this minute. As Frank is starting to chase Brad across the lab and push him with his whip, people will say, I paid $10 to see this movie, and I'm not leaving until I see some male nipple or man titty. And then they start chanting, male nipple, until it's revealed, and then there's a big cheer. It's like the muscle twitch. And then when Scott is in the Zen room inspecting the joint, you say, this place has roaches.
Oh, you can also say at that point, see the roach, smell the roach, and for God's sake, pass the roach.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, so if that's all you've got, I guess that means no. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, so
get the fuck out.
To the late night double feature picture show.
Hey, Kelly,
Yes, Leandra.
I've got something to say.
I bet it'll sound better with stock Christmas music, so hit it!
We at Rocky Horror Minute want to thank you all for your continued support when we needed to take a long break.
That's right. Leandra needed that time off to become a tri-state yodeling champion, a thing nobody wanted her to do.
And during that time, Kelly's boobs grew 3 sizes, just like the Grinch's heart.
Aw, you noticed!
We wanted to get back into recording so very much, but it was our dearest listeners who contacted us who finally brought us back.
As a way of showing our thanks to you, we are sending out Christmas cards. Just send your address to us on our social media.
Or via email at rockyhorrorminute@gmail.com.
Again, thank you so much for your kind words and encouragement over the years. Knowing that people are listening to us makes all the difference. Merry Christmas, baby!